Tonight, Justice League asks the question if Superman and Wonder Woman can ever really just be friends. Starfire shows us that the only thing more powerful than a living nuclear reactor is a living nuclear reactor with a pair of machine guns. And Birds of Prey is so bad at ending its story arcs, it might not even finish this. All that and more tonight on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 59 of the Not So New 52. I am your host and frankly there's not a lot to talk about. It's kind of just an average week in DC Comics. It's whatever. I did go back in the news just to have something to talk about and see what happened 10 years ago. It turns out that there was a legal battle between DC Comics and the heirs of the Schuster family, the creator of Superman, over whether or not they still had copyright claims over the character of Superman. They do not, according to the judge, and DC Comics has full copyright. So that happened 10 years ago today, more or less. Also, just one thing I really want to throw out here is that one of the articles I read on this subject was saying how Man of Steel is slated to come to theaters in 2013, and director Zack Snyder says that it will make Superman more relatable. Time will tell. So, let's talk about the comics that are coming out this week, shall we? This week, October 17th, 2012, we have 13 comics, including the number 13 issues of Batwoman, Birds of Prey, Catwoman, Nightwing, Red Hood and the Outlaws, Supergirl, Green Lantern New Guardians, DC Universe Presents, Justice League, Wonder Woman, Blue Beetle, and Legion of Superheroes. Additionally, we have the number 1 issue following the number 0 issue of Sword of Sorcery, which is, of course, the Amethyst story. A couple things worth noting in those comics. DC Universe Presents starts a new story arc focusing on Black Lightning and Blue Devil, two characters that are totally never going to get their own books. Additionally, we have two events, sort of, kinda. We have Catwoman, which is a prelude to Death of the Family, in the loosest sense of the word prelude, and Green Lantern New Guardians, which is, of course, part of the Rise of the Third Army storyline going on. But with all that said, I genuinely don't have much more to add. Make sure that you tune in to the 5th week, coming up at the end of this month, for backups and little bonus stories that I have not chosen to cover over the course of these normal episodes. And with that, away we go. Green Lantern New Guardians number 13, written by Tony Bedard, art by Andrei, Bressan, and Amilcar Pinna. This is a part of the Rise of the Third Army arc event thing going on. And last issue, in the 0 issue, we discovered Carol. She put back on the Star Sapphire ring. Kyle showed up looking for Hal. Hal's dead, obviously, in some way or another. But we discovered that in his future, he is to wield all the Lantern Corps colors. He's already got green and blue. So this issue is about red. And we open up with a flashback to his old girlfriend, Alex. And he's prepping to meet her dad for the first time. And we keep on getting intercut with Atrocitus, who is on Earth, just beating the crap out of Kyle. And we see just going back and forth, until finally we get to Atrocitus standing over top of bloodied Kyle saying, like, "Come on, man, I know you got rage somewhere down in you, just pull it up already." And Carol steps in like, "Hey, maybe stop beating him up so bad." And he's like, "Don't tell me how to handle rage. I know how to handle rage." And she's like, "Yeah, well, I know your origin story, and I know that you're only rageful because you once loved, and love's my domain, bitch." And he's like, whatever. So then we see that this whole time they were fighting in a graveyard, and he actually runs into the headstone of his old girlfriend, and he just recounts like, "Oh, the Guardian gave me this power and I didn't feel worthy, but she was there and she had me embrace the responsibility right up until she was fridged." Literally like they kept that's what happened. So she's like, "Yeah, that memory doesn't make me angry, Atrocitus, that just makes me sad." So At this point, Atrocitus is just like, all right, screw it, let's go. So he picks up Kyle and flies him off because he's like, yeah, look, I can't get my work done if you're sitting here protecting him the whole time, so we're off. So then we go to Space Sector 2819, and we see two Red Lanterns just flying about, and they're like, yeah, you feel like something's going on around here, like some sort of event or whatever? And the other one's like, nope. And so then they fly off, and then we see they're being tracked by members of the Third Army. And they've entered into the airspace of some particular planet that's like, stop, you will be scanned for any infectious diseases before coming to our planet. Anyway, back on Earth, we see that Atrocitus has taken Kyle to, as far as I can say, a war zone where there are civilians all being lined up at gunpoint pretty much. And he's just like, look at this. Innocents being killed. Doesn't that make you angry? And he like holds Kyle back so he can't do anything. And then we get Atrocitus' whole origin story, which was in Red Lanterns number 0. Like literally the exact same as it was here, so whatever. But then he's like, come on. I know that you're like me deep down. These people are killing other people. Don't you feel angry about that? And Kyle does feel angry about that. And he manages to spark the red energy inside of him and turns into a Red Lantern with like a full helmet, mask change, and everything. So he swoops down. One man was already killed. That's what set him off. Swoops down, starts beating up the entire rest of the armed forces, just knocking all of them out, throwing his like fire blood at them. And he goes back to Atrocitus, and he's like, well, about time you grew a pair. And then he gets pissed off at Atrocitus because he's like, this is your fault. He died because of you. And you're just as bad as they are. And Atrocitus is like, no, I'm actually far worse. And he just smacks down Kyle, knocks him out of the red state. And he's like, all right, well, I did my part. Good luck with the other colors, and save me a guardian or two for when you kill them all. Bye. So he looks at all the people around who are wounded. He sparks up to them blue energy in order to heal their wounds, and then flies back off to talk to Carol. And Carol's fixing up the headstone of his girlfriend when Kyle arrives, and he's just like, hey, I did it. Let's move on to the next one. And she's like, oh, you did it? You got red? And he's like, yeah, let's go. She's like, what's wrong with you? And he's like, you had me channel rage. Like, how do you expect me to feel? This sucks. Let's just go save your boyfriend already. And she's like, that's not... Look, I don't only want to do this to save Hal. That's not all I care about. And he's like, yeah, sure, whatever, let's go. So they're going to find Arkillo, the Yellow Lantern, for the next lesson. Meanwhile, Sector 2819 again, we see that ship that was hailing the Third Army has been breached. They are infected by the Third Army, all starting to turn themselves. But their little scanner thing to say if they have any infectious diseases says like, yep, this thing will take over the host and then spread itself about. Forecast universal pandemic. So that's neat. I really like this one. I think it was a super solid issue the whole way through. Atrocitus looks weird. And I think that's only because I've really seen him done in Red Lanterns, which only has like 2 or 3 artists on it. Neither of which were Andrei Bressan or the other one, Amilcar Pinna. So it's a weird take on him, but it's still recognizable. I really like Kyle's Red Lantern design. I was going to say disguise. No, it looks great. It's a fantastic character design. I hope we see more of that in the future. So, yeah, no, just an enjoyable issue all around. I'd say my only real problem with it is we get those pages of just like, here's my backstory and why it's so tragic. And I'm okay with that for Kyle because we haven't covered that yet. But for Atrocitus, like, this is like the 3rd, 4th time we've covered it across Red Lanterns and this one. So maybe pump the brakes on that. But overall, this issue is a 7.5. Definitely enjoy it. Definitely looking forward to finding out how the Yellow Lanterns and the rest of the Corps go and seeing when we can get to this cover image of White Lantern Kyle again. Catwoman number 13, written by Nocenti, art by Rafa Sandoval. This is ostensibly a prelude to Death of the Family. Yeah. So we pick up with Catwoman. She's just on a random rooftop as a toy starts floating towards her on a balloon. And she swipes at it and she recognizes it as a cute little cat doll. And then she flashes back to her old friend Lola from like the first 3 issues of this series and how the toy actually belonged to her. And she's like, okay, but that thing burned up in the fire that I set. She claims explosion, but that's not how it happened. And then later on she says fire, so whatever. But she's like, oh, that thing burned up. Someone must personally know me and like who I was in order to do this. So that's not good. But as she looks around up on the rooftops, she sees a silhouette figure standing there. And she's like, okay, well, I'm coming after you, whoever you may be. And so she runs after him, and things get like really trippy for 2 pages, where they're all of a sudden on a knight's, like a chessboard, and there's a knight piece up there. And then she runs by, and there is a picture of a green cat that's like a Cheshire cat smiling. And then all of a sudden she comes across a toy robot that displays her like Catwoman image, which I didn't even know there was a Catwoman image, but regardless, displays that up into the night sky. And she says it's a toy robot, but at the same point, it's like massive. Like she has to shove her whole fist in this spotlight in order to stop it. So I genuinely don't know what's going on with that. And when she finally catches up with the silhouette, it turns out it is her own costume. And she's like, I was chasing my shadow the whole time. And then we just leave. We just move on to something else. So maybe that's the Joker. Like it looked like the Joker's silhouette, but I don't get it. So anyway, she's talking to Gwen, saying how she's moved into this big penthouse that nobody's actually staying in. And she starts stripping down out of her civilian clothes into her Catwoman's outfit. By the way, I just leafed through this trade to start it, like, just see what all happened in a general sense. Every single issue, she has some reason to strip. It is shameless. But regardless, Gwen says, yep, nope, I got a job for you, but you got to go meet this guy at a chess club. That's where he wants to meet up. So she goes to this chess club in costume, but also in disguise over the costume. And this guy comes up and he's like, all right, my name's Trip Winter. We want you to steal the Black Queen from here and move it to the White Queen there. And in the process, a pawn will be sacrificed. And she's like, what are you talking about? Also, that sounds like a hit. I don't do hits. And it's like, no, like there's a literal like Black Queen piece at this point in Gotham, and you need to move it to this location where there's a White Queen piece. And she's like, okay, I guess. So she goes to the place, or sorry, she has one night in between then, and somehow the little toy robot, which is now actually toy-sized, breaks into her room and starts like spying on her, and then she just breaks it. And then we get to the actual heist thing. And she does a whole thing of her scouting out, saying like which people are paid thugs, which people are just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And she's reasoning through it all until finally she's like, okay, there's a fat guy in there, and I'm going to use him as a counterbalance in order to get this whole thing going. So she realizes the moment's right. She dives in. She wraps her rope around the Black Queen piece, wraps the other side of her rope around the fat guy who just really wants a slice of his friend's pizza. It's a whole thing. But then fight breaks out. She manages to knock the guy out, counterbalanced, and moves the Black Queen over to where the White Queen piece is, all in one fell swoop. But when she knocks over the White Queen piece, she sees that there's a person inside. And she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know you were in there. Let me get you out. And she's like, no, you idiot. Don't let me out. It's a trap. The pawn will be sacrificed. And then all of a sudden the queen explodes with the woman inside of it. And then we see what looks to be like a trash can nearby. And inside is a little girl. She's like, are you the pawn? She's like, yeah. So Catwoman breaks her out. A bomb is also on that, which also explodes. But yeah, the girl survives. And then Catwoman's like, all right, now what? And that's where we leave off. Genuinely, I don't know. I have no idea what just happened there. This is a very confusing issue. I like the art. Rafa Sandoval does a fantastic job on that. Can't complain at all, really. But yeah, no, I just don't get it. I genuinely, like, I don't get it. And I think this is the start of Ann Nocenti's run. I could be very wrong on that. I think that she started at the 0 issue last month, and now this is her first, like, arc. I don't get how this is a tie into Death of the Family. I don't get, like, I mean, I get this is the setup issue to the arc, but at the same point, I don't get what we're setting up. This is just weird in a lot of ways. So, yeah, overall, I guess this one gets like a 6. Most of that's carried by the art, and I'm kind of giving it the benefit of the doubt that it will make some sort of sense moving on. But from what I know of Ann Nocenti from Green Arrow, that's giving it probably too much credit. So the 6 is very tenable, and it will likely drop as we move forward. Batwoman number 13, written by W. Haden Blackman, art and writing by J.H. Williams III. Last issue, issue 12, we had Batwoman meeting up with Wonder Woman because she's in over her head with all the demigods and whatnot, and she figured Wonder Woman has something in the way of knowledge when it comes to Medusa. And so we open up this issue with Batwoman and Wonder Woman in a sub trying to get to a secret, basically, Amazonian prison. And they just are talking, like, mentally, they're just thinking about each other, whereas Batwoman is completely stunned by Wonder Woman. And Wonder Woman's just like, yeah, okay, I think I got your number. I get what you're all about. So they make their way into this, I don't know, prison, whatever you want to call it. I don't think they actually have a name for it. And there's a labyrinth inside. And when they arrive, they see that there are, like, a lot of rotting corpses in this labyrinth, including guards and people who were also, like, locked up. So it seems like there was some sort of battle going on here, but they don't know who was on the winning side in the end. All they know is that there's nobody here now. But as they make their way towards the end of the labyrinth, they, of course, meet a Minotaur. And the Minotaur shows up, and he's just like, don't go in here. And Batwoman just reacts inflectively and just punches him in the face. And Woman's like, dude, chill. That's a guard. He's on our side. And Wonder Woman talks to the Minotaur, and Minotaur's like, it was the black-hearted Nyx. Nyx did this. And then all of a sudden, Batwoman's like, it get cold in here for anybody else. And the Minotaur is dragged deeper into the labyrinth by some giant, like... The best way I can say is, you know those, like, centipedes with, like, the pincers on them? It's those, but they're massive and black, and they start swarming all over Batwoman and Wonder Woman with this hissing noise. And at a certain point, everything just goes black. So then we cut over to Chase and Director Bones, who are just chilling out, just thinking, like, all right, what's the deal? What's going on right now? And Chase is very annoyed that they let Batwoman basically go out on her own because she thinks that Batwoman will run. And then Bones just tells her, like, hey, look, you're worrying too much about this. Option A is that she comes back and we get all of this intel on Wonder Woman. Option B is she's dead, and then we can train up her cousin, Bet, who is already being trained by the Colonel, to be an even better resource for us. And then she's like, okay, but what about the option where she runs? And Bones is like, I got a contingency for that too, but it's real dirty. So then we cut back to the fight, and Wonder Woman is just completely blind. She can't see anything at all. And we get, like, a whole backstory on Nyx of how she was, like, the mother of darkness and stuff like that. She represents darkness as a whole, but then also she gave birth to, like, I think it was Eros, god of love, and Hemera, goddess of the day. So Wonder Woman tries reaching that part of her, being like, hey, you gave birth to good things. Can you please let us go? And Nyx, through this crazy-ass panel of just intertwining centipede creatures, is just like, no, Medusa has a plan, and we're going to do this thing for Medusa, and all the monsters will be here, and we will rule over them. But then at a certain point, Batwoman starts chiming up, and she's like, hey, I'm going to cut you loose. I need you to close your eyes, okay? And so She gets back Wonder Woman out of all the centipedes, cuts her loose, and then sets off like a super extreme flashbang, which we see Nyx just being blinded and burned by it. And it turns out that it is actually like gonna cause an explosion. So Wonder Woman and Batwoman make their way down a hallway. It's blocked off at the end. She fires off an explosive and they bust through a wall. And then we see these centipede creatures coming after her, but then the explosion goes off and seemingly kills all of them. And they're like, all right, well, that was cool and all, but she is a goddess, and night is falling, and in the darkness, I doubt that they're going to be that scared anymore. And Wonder Woman's like, well, here's the thing. You know that submarine we came in on? Turns out it's Black Manta's, and it also flies. And then she just, like, uses her little car recall button, and the submarine shows up in the air. So then we go to Colonel Kane and Bet, who are just meditating opposite each other. We get Colonel Kane's perspective where he's like, am I being too hard on her? Like, I think I might be putting her through too much. Like, I think I might have gotten past the point where she's okay with, I just need to give her a break and it just needs to be okay. But then we see Bet's perspective where she's just like, ow, oh God, I can't stop thinking about how I was gutted. Everything hurts. But I'm not going to ask for pain medication because apparently Kate didn't need pain medication after she was stabbed. So I'm going to be better than her and I'm going to live up to this. I can do this. I can do this. I can't do this. So then we go back to Wonder Woman and Batwoman for the final little scene where they're like, okay, so as it turns out, there are other people we need to talk to. Particularly, I think we're looking for the children of Nyx. I could be wrong. Maybe it's children of Medusa. Regardless, they make their way out to a trailer park in the middle of like deserted nowhere. And Wonder Woman steps out and just like, Pegasus, which is not the horse. Pegasus, I am Diana. We need to speak to you about your mother. And this guy comes out and he just has these horrible blue wounds all over his body. Like he's rotting pretty much from the inside out. And he's like, all right, what's up? So that's where we leave off. So this entire book, save for like 2 pages, the first and last one, are 2-page spreads. And they work for it. Like, good Lord. The artistry on this book is incredible. It was a pain in the ass to read digitally, but it really, truly, like looking at it after the fact, fantastic. Writing-wise, I like how they gave Batwoman something to do. They allowed her, because her entire opening monologue was, how can I stand with this demigod and like this actual superhero and still have anything left to do? But they showed that her usefulness comes from her ingenuity, not her strength, and her ability to think her way out of these situations. So definitely enjoyed that character defining, and I feel like they're growing closer and closer as we're going on. One moment I did want to mention here is when they're going to the trailer park, he's just like, hey, when I fought Falchion's brother, a demigod, he bled blue, but I learned something that day. And he's like, you learned Falchion wasn't human? And she's like, no, I learned that even demigods can bleed. So it's like, did the whole Batman v Superman thing. That's hilarious. Anyway, no, I definitely enjoyed this one. Just went by really quick because of those double-page spreads. So overall, I'll give this one a 7. No, I'm just really enjoying the world's finest arc here, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the team-up continues. Birds of Prey, number 13, written by Duane Swierczynski, art by Romano, Polenaar. This is the start of a new arc. So last issue, Katana attacked Poison Ivy, which broke their deal and therefore introduced this virus into their system, or like activated it or whatever. And boy, I thought we were going to get some closure to that, but no. So it turns out that in the in-between of those issues, they just are quarantining themselves and getting a antidote from Batman, and we're just, yeah, that's just done now. The virus is not out and about, so screw it. This issue picks up, a guy is in Japan, Yokohama, and he goes to this deep dark hole at like 1,000 feet below sea level, and he just drops a box inside of it, and it says 24 hours until detonation. So then we open up to Gotham City, where Katana is going on a food run because I guess that for some reason she's allowed to leave. Like, I don't know why they're quarantining themselves if it's not, like, it doesn't make any, but regardless, she leaves, and then she's attacked by this group called the Clan of Daggers, I believe. And they just show up, they throw a bunch of daggers at her. She's a little bit outmatched because she's not at her A game, because the antidote apparently takes them off their A game. And then they steal her sword, aka her husband. And so she makes her way back to the greenhouse where they're all staying, hooked up on IV drips, and she's like, they took my sword, we gotta go get it. And they're like, oh, okay, well, look, we'll just get one more dose of the antidote and then we'll head out. And she's like, no, you don't get it, we gotta go now, I thought you were my friend. And she's like, Starling steps up and she's like, hey, look, we are your friends, but like, we can barely stand right now, we are not ready to tangle with that. And she just shoves Starling off and says, I'll go on my own then. So then we open up in Yokohama, where some dude is just watching this clan of daggers pass around this sword. And they're like, whoa, what do you got here? You clearly are taking very good care of that thing, so let me go ahead and jump on in. And he jumps in, and it turns out his name is Condor. And he's a Japanese superhero who has a flight suit. And he busts in, and he's like, oh, I know about the clan of daggers, or Dagger Clan guys. They're quick, so I got to make this equally as fast. And he swoops in, and he grabs one of them, like throws him up against the wall at high speeds, and takes the sword. But he doesn't know it's a sword. It's all wrapped up, so he unwraps it, and he's like, this is it? Okay. Mind you, this entire time, this countdown until detonation has been going down. Right now, they're at 17 hours. So then, I'm forgetting her name, Tatsu. That's Katana's real name. Tatsu shows up in Japan, and she's like, all right, Dagger Clan guys, you would have killed me back in Gotham if you wanted me dead, so I figured you wanted to negotiate. And they're like, that's where you're wrong. And they taser, kidnap her, 14 hours to detonation. She wakes up, she's strung up from the ceiling, and just like, see, you have brought dishonor to the clan of daggers. Therefore, we just wanted you here in order to, like, punish you and torment you before we killed you. And it's much easier. We figured if we took the sword, it'd be a lot easier than trying to take you. And you'd always just come after the sword. So at that point, Tatsu's like, you're the one who's brought dishonor. You suck. And she's, guy's like, oh, well, you suck more. Anyway, we're going to melt down your sword. So at this point, she's about to get slashed up by a bunch of daggers. Birds of prey end up jumping in and start attacking. And it's revealed that Starling, when she put her hand on Tatsu's shoulder, there was actually a tracker there. Mind you, she's not wearing the same clothes anymore, so that doesn't make any sense, but regardless, it happened. So Canary throws out a canary cry, but they actually managed to stand up and just walk away from it, and she's like, well, that shouldn't be able to happen. And then they're like, all right, too many Dagger Clan guys, there's no way we're going to be able to stand up to this many, we gotta bail. And so Starling just grabs one of them and says, like, we'll just take answers from this guy. So they leave, 12 hours until detonation. They went down to a foreclosed sushi bar where Starling is just torturing the guy. Like, straight up just torturing him. And they're all standing outside saying, like, just let her do her job. I'm sure she'll figure it out. So then we cut inside and see that she's torturing him by saying, like, I'm going to cut out your eye, but I'm going to keep your eye intact, and then I'm going to make it look at the other eye. So that way you're going to get some weird sort of thing going on in your brain. And at that point, he starts flipping out, and he's like, oh, Condor took the sword. And she's like, all right, cool, tell me about Condor. So at that point, Katana's about fed up. She's about to storm inside, but then Starling comes out and says, like, it turns out some dude in a bird suit has your husband/sword. And trust me, I know this guy ain't lying. As we cut to an internal shot of him smiling, like very pleased with himself for some reason. So maybe he's lying. Okay, here's the thing. The issue in itself is not bad. It's not a horribly written issue. It's not a horribly drawn issue. It's a fine issue in those regards. But for like the past 3 arcs, there has been no closure on like anything. We get to the finale, quote unquote, and like it's like, oh, this big thing's happening, and then it's just like, yeah, we dealt with it. Like, the first thing, oh, we got a guy who can control minds. Yeah, I guess we're done with him. Oh, there's this Talon running around and... All right, we're done with that. Oh, hey, it was Poison Ivy's threatening to ruin all of our lives. Yeah, we got the antidote. But it's always like in between the issues when they actually deal with this stuff. And it's just, I'm sick of it. Like, I start this off and I feel like it could be like yeah, this is a cool thing. We're in Japan. We're doing ninjas and stuff. Great. But I can't help but think that in 4 issues time, we're going to get to this thing of like, and then it was Katana versus the Ninja Master. And then I'll flip to the next issue and it's going to be like, and now we're back in Gotham. And Katana beat the Ninja Master. And that's all we had to say about that. And it's like, no, give me some closure here, damn it. So yeah, no, it taints it. It taints it a lot. And as such, I cannot give this above a 6. And honestly, I don't think I can really, even if it's great issues, unless something really, really pops, I don't think I can give like anything in this series a 6 until it proves that it can actually end a storyline. So yeah, I'm sorry, but you've really dampened the experience here for me. Nightwing number 13, written by Tom DeFalco, art by Andrei Guinaldo. This is taking place during Death of the Family, but is not part of Death of the Family. So we open up with Nightwing saying, Joker's back in town, and as such, usually the crazies go a little bit crazier because they realize the Gotham police force is like all focused on Joker, but for some reason everything is super duper quiet in Gotham, and he goes to an old like weapons factory. Mind you, he breaks in through a skylight and yet nobody's there, which makes you wonder how many broken windows he just causes for no reason. But regardless, he busts in and he's like, all right, well, people left in a hurry here, where's everyone gone? So he ends up heading back home, and we see this like super high-tech laser security thing, like system that he has going into his basic apartment. And he strips out of his suit, sits down at his computer for like 30 seconds, and it's just like, I've got an idea. And then he puts back on his suit and makes his way out again. And he makes his way to the Iceberg Casino because he's like, well, if anyone's going to know what's going on in the underworld, it's Penguin. So we cut over to the Iceberg Casino, and Penguin's talking to his number 2 named Ogilvy, who's recently made an appearance in Detective Comics. And we see Nightwing busting, and he's like, hey, Penguin, just wanted to have a chat. And immediately all of his bodyguards are up in arms. And Penguin's like, no, that's okay, fine, we'll have a chat. And he's like, where is everybody? And Penguin says, like, here's the deal. It ain't Joker. It's actually Lady Shiva. She's showing up, and she's scared off everybody because nobody knows who she's here for. And Nightwing's like, oh yeah, Lady Shiva. I met her in the Zero issue last month. And Penguin's like, and you live to tell the tale? Maybe you got more spunk to you than I imagined. But regardless, you ain't gonna survive again. Wah, wah, wah. So at this point, he goes back into civilian mode. He makes his way over to Amusement Mile. And he's, of course, trying to fix it up to give a permanent home to Haley's Circus. And he's talking to the one guy who's like leaving as his number 2 to run things. And he's like, yeah, no, like a lot of people are leaving because you're not exactly known for being reliable. So we don't have a lot. Although we do have 2 new acrobats. And he leads them into this husband-wife pair called the Soaring Serranos. And they have a daughter named Christina. And Christina steps up like, hey, did you used to be on the trapeze? And he's like, yep, I was just a little older than you. And then she's like, and then your parents died, right? I wasn't supposed to talk about that. So then at that point, Sonia Brandt shows up. And she's like, Dick, we need you to sign some papers for some stuff. It's really important, so if you could go ahead and drop them by. And then her like assistant starts flirting with Dick. And she's like, that'll be enough, assistant. How about, I'm going to be out of the office, Dick. So how about we have these documents shared over dinner, perhaps tonight? So he's like, all right, is this a date or like what's going on here? So he's prepping for that. Night falls and he gets a call from Sonia saying, sorry, you're going to have to reschedule tonight's meeting. And he's like, oh, it was a meeting. Dang it. Oh, well, time for Nightwing. So he busts out on the city and he immediately comes across Batgirl. And this is apparently set after Batgirl 14, as the editor notes say. That hasn't been released yet, so I don't know what to make of it. But regardless, Batgirl's very super upset the Joker is back. And he's like, yeah, no, that's awful. And she's like, don't you pity me. Don't you tell me I need to sit this out. And he's like, I wasn't. And she's like, I'm going to hunt him down. Are you in or out? And he's like, I'd totally be in, but I have something else I need to do. She's like, typical. You suck, Dick Grayson. And he just goes off. Not in those exact words, but it may as well be. And so Dick puts on a disguise. If you remember back in Batman issue 1, there was like this weird face-changing tech thing. He uses that. And he goes down to an old dive bar that like has all the worst of the worst, like henchmen. And he steps in as a guy named Snake Feldman. And he's like, hey, I'm just looking for some work as Snake Feldman henchman. Anybody got some leads? And there's a guy named Handsome Johnny who's like, yeah, I got something for you. There's a guy named Chippy. He thinks he's going to take down Lady Shiva down by the docks. He's looking for some muscle. And he's like, oh, that sounds neat. I'll be right down. So down by the docks, he got somehow this guy named Chipper got the lead that Lady Shiva was going to be arriving by that point. So he realizes, I can't let them kill Lady Shiva because all murder is wrong. I disagree, but regardless, Chipper, they see a motorboat coming in off the pier, so they all start firing on it. It ain't moving, it ain't dodging, it's just making a beeline straight at them. They keep on firing, and Nightwing's like, I'm saving you some trouble, Chipper, because there's no way you're going to kill her. But they keep on firing at this boat, and it keeps on getting, like, it's not slowing down. It's just going to ram into the pier. And at that point, Nightwing's like, oh, did they actually manage to land a shot on her, or is she wounded? She's not in the boat. You can see this 5 pages coming. She ain't in the boat, because they never actually show the inside of the boat. But regardless, the boat runs aground, and then Nightwing's like, oh my god, she was never on the boat. So at that point, there, in one panel much earlier on, we saw this guy who has a cough hanging out with Sonia Branch as like an accountant or something. This guy's now just walking down the street, still has his cough, and then he's murdered by Lady Shiva. And Nightwing's like, she's been ahead of me from the start. How many targets does she have? How can I stop her before she kills again? So yeah, Lady Shiva's already in Gotham. And this random ass dude got killed and Shiva took his briefcase. Okay, so clearly the Shiva thing ties in with Nightwing's whole amusement mile thing, probably, considering that this guy was only ever shown in that specific panel. Okay, I'm not exaggerating here. Let me count it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages are devoted to this boat coming up and hitting the pier. On page 1, it's obvious that she's not in the boat. And yet they play this up for 5 pages. Bit much. I understand that it is like the fight scene of the issue, and therefore, yeah, sure, you gotta extend it a little bit, but it just felt a bit too much for me. So yeah, overall, it's an okay issue. It isn't great. I think, okay, Lady Shiva's in Gotham. Genuinely, this issue was just basically establishing, for people who didn't read the Zero issue, okay, here's where Dick Grayson is. He's setting up Amusement Mile. He knows Lady Shiva from before. There are mobsters that are all in hiding because of it. It's setting up the threat of Lady Shiva, while at the same point, I feel like it's almost overselling her, because it's like they're doing this thing of, oh, she's so smart that she didn't even stay on the boat. And it's like, duh, So, all right, 6.5. Art's good. Don't really have a problem with it. Writing-wise is the only real critique I have with it. It's just, you're doing unremarkable things, but playing it off as the wow. And that's just a bit much for me. Red Hood and the Outlaws, number 13, written by Scott Lobdell, art by Timothy Green II. Last issue we left off with Starfire and Blackfire just arming themselves with normal-ass guns to take on the Blight on their homeworld. And this issue picks up with Roy narrating, saying like, all right, here's the Blight High Lord who is currently worshipping death and using the Tamaranians on this planet to spawn all of his cult's offspring, I guess. He's using them as like, from the movie Alien, incubation pods, whatever. But anyway, he's like, all right, let's do this. Let's kill them all. Huzzah. But then there's a bright light, and it's, of course, Starfire and her sister touching down to save everyone. And they're not using their firepower, like their actual energy. They're just using the guns. They are just shooting a lot of people. So they keep on firing until finally a sniper gets Starfire in his sights, and Jason comes in, his own guns ablazing, shoots some more Blight people. One of them gets the upper hand and gets, like, Jason, he's about to bite off his head. And one of the shipmates, who I genuinely don't think we ever got the name of, steps in. He's just like, I'm sorry if you didn't want me saving your life, Red Hood. And he's like, nah, it's cool, no big deal. So then Arsenal comes in, fires off some more shots, and we just see the entire crew is here. So they free some Tamaranians, and this entire time Arsenal's talking. He's like, man, isn't Starfire just so hot? Like, not even holding back a little bit. He's just like continues with that. So anyway, at this point we cut to the crew inside the ship, and they're making a call to the Blight, and they're like, hello, Blight command ship. And this is DeFalco, the Dominator, who is on their team. He's like, hello, command ship. We are clearly outnumbered. We wish to surrender. Please open your teleporter so that we may come to you and discuss the terms of surrender. And he's like, all right, cool. So then Kiten gets Isabel, Jason's girlfriend, off the ship. And it turns out that they're actually just going to teleport the whole ship into the Blight ship and self-destruct it. And DeFalco sits there like, thank God I'm alone. Being a Dominator, being with people, like, sucks. And, it never did suck when I was with Starfire. And he goes through how the last night that Starfire was there before she took off for Earth, and he's like, oh, we will miss you. You are the one person that I truly consider, like, a friend or whatever. And he's like, I gave her a hug. It hurt immensely, but I did it anyway. And then she takes off, and we see them. The countdown completes as he teleports onto their ship, and everything explodes. And that was basically the mothership. So we see Blackfire. He's like, oh, yes, we will win this day, sister. This is it. And then she gets impaled by a javelin. And she's like, I have failed you, sister. And Starfire gets so upset. And, like, everyone does, like, oh, no moment. But Starfire gets so upset that she puts down the gun and she lets out her firepower. And Arsenal straight up says, like, I'm just going to read it. It says, can I tell you something personal? There are times when I'm making love with Corey, no matter what she calls it, when a part of my brain wonders what it would be like if she just lost all control, just for a second. I guess now I know. Is it wrong that I find her hotter than ever? She just literally, like, decimated half the planet with her blast, but, whatever. So she picks up the Blade High Lord, and it's just like, you think death's a gift? Death is easy. Try love. And then she gives him a big old fire kiss, which literally incinerates his whole body. Which seems like death still, but, whatever. So then a week passes, and we see Corey is in some ceremonial garb. She's in front of the throne of Tamaran. And it turns out her sister survived. And sister's like, oh, please, sister, won't you stay here and rule with me? And she's like, no, I cannot. I have found happiness and love amongst the humans. Peace, I'm out. So then we see a little internal monologue from Blackfire saying, like, oh, the Blight Lord was right to fear the gathering of the 13. Even if I must sacrifice my sister, that must never come to pass. So they all hop onto a brand new ship, the HMS DeFalco, and Kiten is the commander of the ship. And she's like, all right, I'll bring you all back to planet Earth, and they all make their way back. And then we cut real quick to Starfire's crash ship, where we see someone is inside rooting around. And he goes in and he finds one of Jason's red hoods. And it turns out it's the Joker. Oh no, death of the family is a thing. So yeah, this is somehow going to tie into that. Okay, so here's the thing. I like this issue, but not because the issue itself did anything, I guess. It's more so my expectation of, I truly 100% thought the sister was, like, just gonna betray them. Like, at any point here. But it never came. And I gotta say, that's my own expectations of, like, oh, clearly this is gonna be a double. She just looks evil. But it never came. So I actually have to give Scott Lobdell some credit there of like, you got me. Like, you made it so obvious that there was going to be a change that you genuinely pulled the rug out from under me. So I'll give you that. Yeah, beyond that, it's a solid wrap up to a story. It gave some real depth to Starfire. Showed off like her true like power if she really wanted to let it go. Not that I ever doubted she was a powerhouse. I still don't understand why they were fighting with just normal guns. Like, that just seemed stupid. But regardless, hey, they did it. So, yeah, my only real critique with this issue is the whole Arsenal narration throughout the whole thing, where he's just like, God, I am sleeping with that, and I'm really not going to let you forget it. It's like, thank you. I need, yep, thank you. I have that. Please stop telling me now. So overall, this issue, I'm going to give it honestly, I'm going to give it a 7. I think that this has been one of the stronger arcs out of the series so far. I can't say that I expect it to keep this momentum, but I surely hope it does. But we will see what happens as Death of the Family approaches. Supergirl number 13, written by Mike Johnson, art by Sami Basri. Last issue, we left off with Simon Tycho, aka Guy from First Arc, showing up in Supergirl's Fortress of Solitude at the bottom of the ocean, and he did not look very good. And this issue picks up with him literally explaining, like, okay, here's what happened. You blew up my satellite, and I had to, like, share my body with a translucent alien jelly man. And now I've come back here. I need you to understand this isn't for payback, but simply because I tracked the energy signature of this place. And then Supergirl just comes up and like picks him up by the throat and is like, shut up and stop talking my language. I don't want to hear it no more. So then a fight breaks out. And for the most part, like, it's a smackdown where Tycho's just like, yeah, no, you're faster and a little bit stronger than I remember, but like, I've got new alien jelly powers, so we could fight, or you could just listen to me, because I'm not here to fight you. So inside this fortress are a bunch of the, like, sun crystals, I think they were called. And Tycho's like, you stole one of these from me. After I stole it from you, I tracked the energy of these things back down to here, came down, checked it out, and wouldn't you know it, I think they have a recorded message on it. So let's see what's up. And they start playing the message, and it's literally the message from her father, but just audio. There's no like hologram or anything like that. And it plays through, and we hear the gunshot noise, and she's like, why do I have to keep dealing with this? But then it continues on, and she hears the voice, as we learned in the Zero issue, of her mother saying, how could you do that? And Tycho is also able to pick up on this. He's like, that's your mom? And your mom shot your dad? Oh no. But it sounds like your dad isn't done yet. And she hears how he said launch and launched Supergirl out into deep space. And he's like, wow, that's some traumatic stuff. And we see Supergirl is just crying about it as her memories come flooding back. She remembers all of it now. And he's just like, okay, well, now we know why Daddy sent you here. Here's the thing. Your dad didn't send you here empty-handed. He sent you here with this whole place. Like, he must have figured you needed this place. And all these crystals, they have incredible data to them. Here's the issue, though. I can't access it. All my alien jelly powers won't let me in. It seems to only want to respond to you. So, despite the fact that this place is underwater and yet somehow it doesn't get crushed underneath the ocean and also has a self-renewing energy source, I can't figure it out. So I need you to, like, help me through here. So she speaks out. She's like, hello, can you hear me? And she's like, oh, hello, I am Sanctuary. And it's like, Sanctuary? And it's like, yes, your father left me as a gift. And he's like, oh, Sanctuary. And Tycho's like, hey, try something like simple. Do like a really simple command. She's like, Sanctuary, dim the lights. And all the lights go down. And he's like, fantastic. It responds to you. Now, tell it to listen to me, as he starts like attacking her again. And he's just like, God, see, this is, you just keep doing this. You just want to control things. That's all you want. And he's just like, yeah, like clearly. Do you not understand the rich and powerful, Supergirl? And he goes on this whole long thing of like, you have all these powers, but you are so completely afraid to use them. You need to be something. You need to do something with it. Rather, you're too nice. And then he explains how down here in the ocean floor, he's done his research and realizes that she's powered by the yellow sun. Down here, without the yellow sun, she'll be depowered. So either she has to give it up to him, or they're going to fight until the point where she actually dies. And he's just like, she stops and she thinks for a moment. She's like, Sanctuary, do you detect someone else in here? And Sanctuary's like, yeah. She's like, Sanctuary, neutralize that other person. And all of a sudden, these crystals start coming up out of the ground and trapping Simon. And Simon's trying to, like, smash his way out of it. And she's like, oh, this stuff doesn't even get crushed by the ocean. There's no way you'll smash through it. Although I will let you out if you say that you're sorry. And it's, like, growing up around his face. And he's like, what? She's like, just say you're sorry. He's like, I'm sorry. And then he's covered up by the crystal. And he's like, oh, too late. Here's the thing. You said that you don't need to eat or sleep anymore because of your alien jelly body. So I'm assuming that you're just going to be able to live in there alive and aware of everything indefinitely. And I'll let you out eventually when you change. So at this point, she turns the lights back up. She grabs a sun crystal and she's like, okay, all right, maybe my dad wasn't that awful, but you still could have given me the choice to stay with you and Mom. That's a bit of a dick move, Dad. But regardless, thanks for the home base. So then she tells Sanctuary to go through the internet and call Shaban back in New York. And Shaban wakes up to a video call from her. She's like, hey, I'm down at the bottom of the ocean on an alien base. And Shaban's like, that's a good joke. Oh, you're serious? Okay, that's weird. But then Sanctuary, she basically says, like, yeah, you can call whenever you want. Sanctuary interrupts and says, I'm detecting an unidentified Kryptonian on the planet. And Kara's like, yeah, it's probably just Kal-El. He's on the planet. And he's like, no, Kal-El's pretty well identified. There's something else on the planet. And we see Superman is fighting something. And it's apparently Kryptonian. And this leads directly into the crossover Superman event, Hell on Earth, which I believe starts in Superman 13, 14, 13. I have it somewhere. I think it's 13. So yeah, it's something. Here's the thing. I do enjoy everything it's set up here. I think it did a fantastic job of showing, like, okay, here's how Kara finds out about this thing, and here's how she feels about it and whatnot. But from a reader's perspective, this is kind of just playing over all the things that we already know for a huge part of the issue here, where it's like, we knew that Simon Tycho had this body. We knew what actually happened to Kara because of the Zero issue. We know how she has her powers and whatnot. Like, we know all this. So it's just recounting for the reader's sake things we already know because it was introduced without Kara's knowledge. Or rather, we're showing that different characters have learned different things. That being said, I think that the latter half of the issue and her learning, like, about Sanctuary and, like, her working through her feelings with her father, having Shaban show back up, love that. This felt like not exactly a capper, but it did feel like okay, we've reached a point with Supergirl. She is now accepted. She has a place here on Earth. She has a friend she can talk to. She has her own fortress. This is kind of like, okay, this is the turning point of Supergirl's finally found some place on Earth for herself. And in that regard, I really do enjoy it. I think it's a solid issue. So overall, I'm going to give this one a 7.5. Really do enjoy it. Really looking forward to how this continues. Hell on Earth, of course, is a completely separate thing, but if the writers of this have any input on that at all, I'm definitely intrigued to see where it all turns out. DC Universe Presents number 13, written by Marc Andreyko, art by Robson Rocha, a.k.a. Black Lightning and Blue Devil, Part 1. This is, of course, an anthology book covering multiple stories, and we are hitting the Black Lightning and Blue Devil, two characters that I am pretty much not familiar with at all. Black Lightning a little more so, but Blue Devil's just total stranger to me. So we open up in downtown LA, where a drug deal's going on. Some guys with some really high-tech looking guns are meeting up with just a standard guy. He hands over an envelope of cash being like, all right, man, so can I get what I need? And then we see Blue Devil is there, and he jumps into action just like, oh, you must pay the Blue Devil his due. And the best way I can describe Blue Devil is a little over-designed, but maybe that's just me. He's got a lot going on, though. But anyway, he starts attacking all the gangsters. The guy who was trying to buy something starts running and runs into Black Lightning. And he's like, all right, you get out of here. You stay away. And Black Lightning sends a lightning bolt out at the group of gangsters, which it hits one of their cars, causing this massive explosion that you think would have killed a bunch of people. Apparently it didn't, but Blue Lightning looks down and he's like, oh, cool. Suit's fireproof. That's neat. So the gangsters that managed to get away keep running. And then Black Lightning shows up and he's like, so Tobias Whale's working with the devil, huh? And Blue Lightning's like, no, I'm trying to take down Tobias Whale. I don't work for him. But Black Lightning's unwilling to hear it because he looks like a literal devil. And a fight breaks out between the pair of them. Black Lightning throws out some lightning. Blue Devil charges him. And Black Lightning dodges until Blue Devil throws his, I'll call it a pitchfork, whatever you want to call it, at Blue Lightning, or Black Lightning, trapping his arm. And when Black Lightning tries to fire off a lightning bolt, it ends up shocking himself. So then the cops show up in a helicopter, and there's apparently a whole bunch of civilian onlookers. And Black Lightning uses the opportunity to get shot off on Blue Devil. I might occasionally say Black Devil or Blue Lightning. Forgive me. Go by the second word. So at that point, Blue Devil's like, all right, I'm out. And he just flies off, seemingly. Next day, I think it's Jefferson Pierce. Yes, Jefferson Pierce is teaching class in a high school, and he's reading a newspaper article calling the pair of them either heroes or psychos. And bell goes off, everyone leaves, and Jefferson's dad shows up, and he's like, hey, I'm a reporter, and I got a source. Let's go to dinner. And they go out to a food truck, and his father starts laying out the thing of how he's got a lead on Tobias Whale, this big drug guy and weapons guy, and he's finally going to be able to take him down. And Jefferson's like, are you sure? Like, he's a dangerous man, Dad. And he's like, don't worry about it. Let's celebrate, though. And then we cut over to Tobias Whale, who is this just hulking mass of a man, white skin, and he's just smashing his desk because of how his men were attacked by these two nut jobs in costumes. And he tells them, all right, you go out there and you find who these heroes are and you get them back to me. And so he sends out the guys to find them. So the guys get into a high-speed car chase with the police, and they figure like, hey, we're putting the civilians in danger. That's like catnip to these heroes. And wouldn't you know it, Blue Devil does end up showing up. He literally slices the car in half and stops the guys so that the cops can get to him. But before he can leave, one of Whale's other guys puts a tracker on Blue Devil, so they're able to see where he goes as he flies away. And he goes to a place called Graveyard Pictures, an old movie studio, where apparently his grandfather, who is also a writer, director, actor, studio mogul, is waiting for him. And he knows that it's his grandson, Daniel Cassidy. So he tells him, take off that suit. It's dangerous. You don't know, like, how to use it. It's just going to ruin your life. And he's like, all right, can we talk about this later? Like, I sweat in this costume a lot. So then we see Black Lightning's father walking the streets trying to get that source. And Black Lightning is on a nearby rooftop keeping an eye out for his dad. And his dad seemingly says the wrong word, gets some guns pulled on him, and Black Lightning rushes in with his powers. But enough of that. We cut over to the guys who followed Blue Devil. They follow the tracking device to this picture studio, and they go inside the warehouse, see all these different costumes, and end up stealing a random cup, which, whatever. But as they do so, the grandpa turns the corner, and he is shot multiple times. Daniel hears all the hubbub, puts the costume fully back on, and as he walks out, he sees his grandfather bleeding on the floor, and his grandfather dies in his arms, and he's like, you monsters, what have you done? And that's where we leave off. So the pair of them have yet to really interact, despite the fact that they're both going after the same gangster Tobias Whale. The pair of them are just kind of split that one way and then went their separate ways again. So I'm sure that they'll meet up again. Clearly, this is a joint story. As for this issue, it's good. I mean, it's not great yet. I think it does a good job of showing the personalities of Black Lightning and Blue Devil, whereas Black Lightning is more straight-laced and like very much by the book sort of guy. doesn't take any unnecessary risks. Blue Devil is far more impulsive and not really sure is what he's doing, especially because it seems like he literally just started doing this that night, more or less, because he didn't know his suit was fireproof. So overall, I think the characterization's really there. It's just a matter of I don't know where the story is quite going yet, and this very much is an origin story at the very least for Blue Devil. We'll see how much of Black Lightning's is actually covered already. So overall, I'm going to give this one a 7. I like it. It's just not great yet, but it has a lot of promise. So I'm definitely looking forward to future issues coming up. Justice League 13, written by Geoff Johns, art by Tony S. Daniels. Last issue we left off with Superman and Wonder Woman making out. And this issue we pick up with Superman and Wonder Woman making out. So they break the kiss, and Superman's like, Diana, and then Wonder Woman's like, I gotta go. And she just flies off. And then Superman's like, oh, okay. Yeah. So then 5 days pass, and we're in Central Park, and Wonder Woman is fighting against Cheetah. And Wonder Woman's like, Barbara, please let me save you. And Cheetah's like, save me. I'm part animal, and I'm super strong and fast. Humanity sucks. I'm going to keep being a cheetah. And she basically says, like, I give in all my instincts. Use your lasso of truth on real people and ask them what their deepest, darkest desire is, and you'd be surprised about how bad humanity really is. I'm the only one who's embracing it. So at this point, she comes up and she slashes Wonder Woman somewhere on her, like her shoulder or neck or whatever. And she passes out. Wonder Woman just passes out. And when she comes to, it's Cyborg and Flash who find her. And she's like, where's Cheetah? I can't fail her again. So then we have Batman and Aquaman who break into, I believe, the Pentagon in order to talk to Steve Trevor, basically get the backstory on Cheetah. Meanwhile, Superman, Flash, and Cyborg are all getting the backstory on Cheetah from Wonder Woman. And basically they say her name is Barbara Ann. She worked at Smithsonian. One day it got broken into. Wonder Woman was there to save the day. And then they became super best buddies. And then because she was so close to Wonder Woman, she was put in charge of Argus's Black Room, where she saw all sort of crazy magic stuffs. Until one day she was dealing with a ritual dagger. It cut her, and she became the cheetah. And so Diana blames herself because she wouldn't have been in that position if it wasn't for her. So yeah, she's trying to save Barbara from whatever. So then Superman hears all this. He's like, well, we can help. And Wonder Woman's like, hey, don't worry about it. This is my problem, not your Justice League problem, so no big deal. And Superman's like, hey, Cyborg and Flash, could you give us a room? And they're like, okay. That's weird, but yeah. So they just go outside, and Superman's like, hey, look, let us help you find your friend. And she's like, I don't get involved when Lex Luthor's causing problems. And he's like, yeah, because we don't, that's not a thing. Look, we know you don't need our help. We want to help you. And she's just like, look, is this because of the kiss? And he's like, no, it's not. It's because we're good friends. But it was a very nice kiss. And she's like, yeah, it was. So then we go to Cyborg and Flash who are standing outside the room, and basically Flash is like, is the League kind of falling apart right now? Because Batman and Aquaman are arguing about who's leading. Superman and Wonder Woman are apparently having something on the other side of the door. Green Lantern just quit and then died. So I don't know, there's a lot going on. And Cyborg's like, I hope not, because I literally have nothing else in my life besides that. And Flash is like, you sleep up here? What do you do when we're not here? And he's like, watch some movies, read some books, sort through all of the data on the internet, the usual. And then he goes into his whole thing of how he thinks he might just be a machine that believes he's Victor Stone rather than Victor Stone with machine parts. And Flash is like, dude, like, no. Machines don't laugh at jokes. Machines don't, like, care about other people. Have you ever wanted to make love to a toaster? No, I rest my case. So at that point, Cyborg's like, you're a pretty funny guy, Flash. And he's like, call me Barry. Anyway, what's going on in that room with Superman, Wonder Woman? And we see inside the room, basically they're like, yeah, okay, look, we'll help you find Cheetah. But it's apparently in order to find how to cure Cheetah, they need to find the tribe that the ritual dagger came from. And at that point, Superman calls back to Cyborg, and Cyborg's like, yeah, I'm already on it. I'm cross-referencing yada yada boom boom. And we can scour the area to find this tribe. And we cut back down to Aquaman and Batman, who are talking to Steve. And Steve's like, all right, or they're like, all right, Steve, thank you for the information. Steve's like, you think maybe I could talk to Diana? I didn't quite like where we left each other last time. And Aquaman's like, yeah, we'll pass on the message, bye. So he just leaves. So then Batman does actually pass on the message and says like, hey, Steve's kind of unhappy being shut out like this. And she's just like, I'm not going to put him in danger anymore. Moving on. So they go out to the jungle. Flash is doing recon in this whole area. And he's like, I can't find them. They're not, I don't know what else to do. Maybe they're underground. And at that point, Superman hears something, and Cyborg picks it up as well. There's some sort of chanting across this waterfall, and Batman's like, and there's something behind us as well. And before he can even react, Cheetah's there. And she slashes at Batman, slashes at Flash, jumps over Cyborg, and makes her way to Superman. And as she approaches Superman, she bites him into his neck, and because he is technically weak to magic, it goes through. And when Wonder Woman finally manages to catch up and gets up to Superman, he's now a cheetah. Like he's just a full cheetah guy. Yep, it's passed on by bite. Cheetah has never bitten anybody before. All right, so it's good. I mean, it's written. It's perfectly fine issue. It's written well. Art is great throughout. I don't have any real issue with it. It introduces Cheetah as this character, and because of the overarching thing going on in Wonder Woman's comic, which is more God-focused, it makes sense that we're getting Cheetah here, because it didn't really seem like we were going to be getting it in Wonder Woman's story. So I'm okay with it showing up here, getting the backstory as well there. I don't have a reason to care about Steve Trevor yet. I know that they've really been pushing him, like, all throughout the last arc, and then also here now, but, like, he's only ever just been the message guy. He's only ever been, like, the liaison. I don't care about him yet. I want to, especially if they're going to keep pushing him, but, like, that whole thing with, like, it's almost feeling like they're trying to just push this little romance, like, love triangle thing now. And I'm not sure if I like it. It just doesn't feel quite earned yet. It could get there. I'm not saying it can't. But it's not quite there yet. So overall, again, fine issue. Art's fantastic. Tony S. Daniel does a great job throughout. I'd say my only real critique is that the Flash Cyborg page feels just a bit more rushed than the other pages. It just feels a bit more flat, but maybe that's just because it's all in just one hallway and like none of the characters move. I don't know. Could just be me. But beyond that, perfectly fine issue. I'm going to go ahead and give this one I'm going to give it a 7, but that's mainly out of comparison to other Justice League comics. I think this doesn't quite stand up to the other, what we've gotten. If I was to be objective, it'd probably be a little bit higher because this is better than a lot of other comics, but compared to other Justice League ones, it's only a 7. So we'll see how long the Cheetah thing takes. I imagine not very long at all. Wonder Woman number 13, written by Brian Azzarello, art by Tony Akins. Where we left off last issue, Apollo had taken the throne of Olympus and turned Olympus into a giant mall, as far as I could tell, skyscraper. Hera was cast out and made mortal, and Hermes stole Zola's baby. And this issue picks up with the Antarctic search team doing something. They're all scouring for something, and they found a guy who's just, as far as we can tell, naked, huge, and down here chilling. And this doctor steps up to him and is just like, hello, I have no weapons and I come in peace. And the guy speaks in an unfamiliar language and he's like, we've been waiting for you. And then this huge guy just picks up the doctor, bites his brains out of his skull, and then throws him down to the ground. It's like, I have no name. I am the Crippler of Souls, the Firstborn. And then walks off. So I'm going to call him the Firstborn. So anyway, we cut to Olympus, which is now, of course, a giant city architecture. Like, it's a bunch of buildings, but it's like a skyscraper. So someone steps up, Dionysus, and he steps up and he's like, man, all right. And we see that Ares is here down at the bottom, just having a drink. And he's like, well, we're here. Let's go up and see whatever Apollo wants. So they get up, and Apollo's just having a rooftop pool party. And apparently only the sons and daughters of Zeus have been invited, the ones who are actually gods, like full gods. So they show up, and Hephaestus is there as well. And we see that Apollo's like, okay, and the only one who hasn't shown up is Athena, because Athena rejects the fact that Apollo is taking the throne. So anyway, Apollo steps up and he's like, all right, here's the deal. I got 2 prophecies from the oracles. The first is that there's a war coming. The second is that a child of Zeus would slay one of us and take the throne for themselves. And it's just like, okay, well, all the children of Zeus here, and we're the most powerful of them. And then Apollo points out, like, actually, Wonder Woman managed to, like, actually cause damage to the moon goddess. What's her name? Artemis. I'm going to say Artemis. I'm probably wrong, but regardless, he's like, all right, so Diana is actually someone that could pose a threat to all of us. Just letting you all know. So then we cut to Diana and Lennox, who apparently survived. He just heals over time, so that's a thing. And we see that Zola is basically crashing on their couch in, I don't even know where they are now that I think about it, but they're in a place. And Hera shows up and is like, oh my god, guys, I found this thing called ice cream. It's delicious. And Zola just gets up, knocks the ice cream out of her hands, and starts trying to strangle Hera. Wonder Woman and Lennox separates them, and it's just like, okay, look, Zola, yeah, you could kill Hera, but I really don't want you to, so please don't. Murdering is wrong. And so she just spits on Hera and calls it a day. But then Lennox points out, it's like, okay, look, here's the thing. If you want help from other children of Zeus, aka powerful demigods, most of them aren't going to help you. There's only 5 of them left. I think they said that there are 2 of them. So, and then, there are 7 total. They are 2 of 5 that are still left alive. 2 of them died. Okay, that's it. Moving on. So, Lennox says, like, here's the thing. Because Hera's here, they aren't going to come to you. You need to go to them. And there's one that I know would probably help you, but you need to go find her. Her name is Soraka of the Wind. So, at this point, Wonder Woman makes her way to Libya. She comes across a military group that, as soon as they see her, they open fire. It, of course, does nothing to her. She fires back the bullets and intimidates them. And then, as they're leaving, she sees a pot move nearby. And when she takes off the lid, there's a little girl inside. And she's like, oh, please, I couldn't get out. When the bad guys showed up, everyone went into hiding. And Wonder Woman's like, well, okay, where'd they go hide? And she points them at this underground, like, bunker area. And she's like, oh, when we're afraid, we go in here. And so she picks up the girl, carries her inside, and says, like, I've gotten rid of the bad guys. You're welcome to come back to your village. But nobody answers. The place seems deserted. And the door slams shut behind her. And she's like, all right, well, I'll protect you. I'll keep you safe. And they make their way deeper into this place. And it's a huge, ornate, underground, like, labyrinth, pretty much. And the girl's like, oh, yeah, I found it. This palace was a place of a king and many queens, but they're all dead. Soraka lives here now. And one of them's like, oh, Soraka's here. Cool. And then as soon as they say that, a bunch of knives and daggers and stuff start firing out of the walls at Wonder Woman and the child. And Wonder Woman uses her bracers to block them all. And she's like, all right, Soraka, come on out. But then she looks down at the girl, and it turns out she missed one of the daggers, and it impaled the girl. And she's like, you said you'd protect me. And she's like, I'm sorry. I thought I did. And the girl just crumbles into dust. And at that point, her voice rings out saying, like, it's all right. I never believed you anyway. And we see that the girl was actually just a projection of Soraka, who springs up from the dust and starts strangling Wonder Woman. And that's where we leave off. Complicated issue, setting up a whole new story arc here, because it really did feel like issue 12 was like end of act 1, where it was like, okay, we have given birth to the child was taken by Hermes, Apollo has taken the throne, like that's it, we have hit the end of the part. This is setting up a whole new thing where it sounds like they're going to find some other children of Zeus to try to bolster their powers and find wherever this child ended up. Whole new story arc. I think that it's an interesting start. I think it did well of setting up the new status quo of like, okay, here's where the gods are. Here's how they're interacting with each other. Nobody's really challenging Apollo for the throne. but they are saying that Athena is against it, so that's something at least. It did a good job of setting everything up. In terms of actual plot, a little bit shaky, but we had to get to a point where it's like, okay, here's what the new quest is, more or less, and I'm liking it. I think it's a solid setup. So overall, I'd give this issue 7.5. I think it's a good issue, again, but just setup. It's hard to give it anything higher than that. Art-wise is very good. I gotta say, the Firstborn obviously seems like he would be the Firstborn of Zeus. Very interested to see how that turns out, because he is all muscle. 200% interested in that. So as we keep that thread moving on, by the time that he interacts with Wonder Woman, I'm super intrigued to see where that turns out. But until then, definitely looking forward to it. Blue Beetle number 13, written by Tony Bedard, art by Ig Guara and Marcio Takara. Okay, so Justice League International Annual. Blue Beetle was teleported into deep space. Zero issue. We see that he was teleported really close to the Reach, like, homeworld, because he was attacked by a bunch of other Blue Beetles. Also, there was a guy named Skywalker. I think that was Skywalker. Skydancer. Skywalker is Star Wars. So, this picks up from there. And he's still being attacked by a bunch of other Blue Beetle scarabs. And he's like, okay, Scarab, how fast can we fly back to Earth? And he's like, well, at light speed, you'd be dead by the time we got back. And he's like, cool, counterattack, please. So they look through a bunch of countermeasures until finally the suit finds one that'll take out these scarabs for at least long enough for him to get his bearings. And he sends off, like, basically an EMP. Calls him Megaton Fury. But basically, they manage to knock Jaime around a little bit more until finally the suit's like, oh, they're just firing standard attack measures. And he's just like, this is standard. Why didn't you tell me? How much have you not told me, bug suit? So at that point, he's like, all right, whatever. Just get me into hyperspace. He's like, if I were to take you into hyperspace, your body would literally rip apart. And it's like, all right, well, then take me to the nearest planet. And he's like, okay, well, the nearest planet you're not going to like. And he's like, why not? And as they get in range of the planet, it's literally the Reach homeworld. He's like, all right, welcome to Reach World. And he's like, all right, well, screw it. If we got to go to a planet, we're going to have to do this planet. So he heads in. There's a bunch of drones outside the planet telling him to identify himself. And it's like, okay, well, shut them up. How do we get them off the back? And he fires off a decoy drone that will answer all the comms and put the pursuers on the trail of decoy. And he's like, all right, cool. So we'll be able to get down to the planet at the very least. So once they land on the planet, they're introduced by a couple of worker drones who are basically little bug creatures that don't seem to be completely biologic. They don't have any like tech or anything. And they step up and they start questioning him in some sort of alien language. And Jaime's like, okay, well, answer them too. And the scarab throws off pheromones, because apparently that's what answers their question, is certain pheromones. And he's like, all right, well, suit, can I trust you to pass for normal while we're here? And he's just like, yeah, I mean, if the Reach get their hands on you, they're also going to destroy me. So, yeah, no, we're working together, Jaime. So, at this point, they start exploring the world, and they come across the tomb of the unknown soldier for the Reach, but as it turns out, inside they aren't unknown soldiers. It's all of the greatest, like, conquerors and killers that their bodies wore out, and so they came here to be buried. And inside, we see Skydancer, who just wakes up from his pod, and he looks like a goddamn zombie. And he's like, Kajida, my old scarab, I smell you, you're in the air. And then we get a history of everything from the Zero issue. And he's like, because I was bonded to him for so long, I became one with scarab technology. I am the scarab god. So he just walks his way out of the tomb, and like, the guards there are like, did you just come out of the graveyard? And he's like, yes, and you will let me go. And they're like, yeah, we'll let you go. Have a nice day, sir. So he makes his way down, and he's like, I'm going to get Kajida. I'm going to get my scarab back. So then we come across Jaime. He's managed to find a spaceport, and he's like, this seems like a bad joke. And he's like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, I'm Hispanic. I was deported to another planet, and the first thing I'm doing when I get there is steal a car. But I'm Tis. And Jaime's like, or in the Scarab's like, I don't get it. And he's like, yeah, whatever. Okay, anyway, let's just go steal a ship. So at this point, another drone finds them, but this one is a soldier drone, and the pheromones aren't going to work on them, and they don't really have a way to get around them. So at that point, a different scarab comes up and says, like, hey, there you are, my old friend. Come on, come with me. I want to tell you all about my conquerings. And it turns out this is Kaji Kai, who we saw not only within his own comic, who was about to, like, attack Jaime, but he was called over to Green Lantern New Guardians to attack the Blue Lantern homeworld. And he comes up to Jaime and he's like, hey, just do what I say and walk away slowly. So he just makes his way away from the soldier drones. And the soldier drones are like, oh my God, that's Kaji Kai. He's so cool. So at that point, Kaji Kai is like, okay, here's the thing. I know that your scarab's busted. I know that you're a normal human. I know your name is Jaime Reyes. And I need to learn what makes you you. And he's like, what do you mean? And he explains the whole thing of how when he was attacking the New Guardians, the home world of the Blue Lanterns, the Blue Lanterns took off his bug suit for just a second, but it was just enough that he was able to free himself from, like, the mind, like the hive mind, and he realized that he was just being possessed. So now he's been ever so slowly exercising more and more control over his own scarab, but he wants to be as free as Jaime is, where he's able to use his own scarab for his own purposes. And they realize, like, okay, well, how do you suggest we do that? And Kaji Kai's like, I think we need to go to the Scarab homeworld, not Reach World, like the place where the Scarabs are made, blow it up. And Jaime's like, I mean, you're the boss, let's go. So they hop into a spaceship, and this whole time, Sky Dancer is, like, following them around. And as they make their way in the ship, he, like, leaps at it, and the door shuts in his face, and he just kind of, like, does that slow slide down thing that you see in, like, Looney Tunes. I don't know if it's supposed to be a comedic beat, but it really did feel like it. But anyway, he's like, no, I'm not going to let you get away again. So he heads off to another spaceship, hijacks it by spraying, as far as I can tell, tentacle blood at all of the other Reach soldiers in there. And then he hijacks it to follow Kajida. And he's like, oh, they're going to the Scarab homeworld. What better place to kill them and reclaim my Kajida. So, yeah, no, it's interesting. I think, so the Zero issue had Skydancer be teleported to the Reach homeworld. So I think I knew this was coming in some way, that we were going to reconnect with him. I didn't expect him to be the villain, it seems like. I mean, he's on the cover now that I know what he looks like, but yeah, no, it's strange, because that didn't seem, when we left him, yes, he wanted to die with the Scarab, but at the same point, it didn't seem like he was evil in any way, but I guess it's been literally millennia since then, so a guy can change in that period of time. Overall, though, I liked how much this issue set up, how much it set forward. Kaji Kai and the whole thing of him, like, of something that happened in a totally different book managed to inform this character, and they're running with it. I think that really did work in a general sense for this character. So overall, I'd say that this one is definitely like a solid 7.5. The only thing that kind of brings it down for me is that the opening sequence just kind of felt really, I don't want to say lackluster, but it felt very rushed. It felt very, okay, we're just kind of like, he's being attacked by all these scarabs, and yet for some reason he's just able to get away from them because the story, it felt like somebody put the writer in that spot and he didn't want to be there. So he just looked for the most convenient out. So overall, it's fine. It's a 7.5, but it's setting up much bigger things, and I'm far more interested in those bigger things and seeing how they all turn out in the end. Legion of Superheroes number 13, written by Paul Levitz, art by Scott Collins. Last issue, I can't remember, but I think the team was betrayed and then they escaped or something like that. I don't know. So anyway, we pick up on an asteroid mining thing that is being ransacked by pirates, and we have Chemical Kid, Element Lad, and Cosmic Lad. Two of those are named on the book. So they're all fighting against the pirates or whatever, and it's just like, is this really a thing for the Legionnaires? Chemical Kid asks, and he's like, yeah, because it's like the 5th time that these pirates have attacked, so we're here to lend the science police a hand. So they show up, but it turns out these aren't just run-of-the-mill normal pirates just looking for a little score. They are kidnapping like the entirety of an asteroid's ore in their giant ship, and Cosmic Lad uses his magnetic powers to pull all of the ore against their magnets and basically shatter it back down to the planet. And Element Lad and Cosmic Lad both scatter, but then Chemical Kid just freezes. He's like, guys, what am I supposed to do? As his ore is hurtling down upon him. Element Lad turns around, manages to get him out of the way. Or I should say get him out of the way. He manages to get him to duck as Cosmic Lad holds up the entirety of the meteor stuff from killing them. So at that point, he's just like, all right, yeah, I got hit in the arm by a beast meteor, but Chemical Kid just froze. It's fine. It all happens to all of us. And Chemical Kid's like, I didn't freeze. Okay, yeah, I froze, but sorry. And it's just, he's like, okay, can you use your chemical powers to help me heal? He's like, nah, I don't actually know how to do that. And he's like, great, cool, thanks. So cut back to Legion headquarters. Brainiac's doing a scan on, what's her name? The golden one, the one who betrayed him, trying to figure out like why she betrayed him, if something was implanted in her brain or something like that. And Duplicate Damsel is not happy that she's being held captive in that way because, I don't know, she doesn't like Brainiac. So at that point, Duplicate Damsel makes her way out into the garden in a huff, and Dream Girl shows up, and she's like, hey, why did you risk your life to save him if you're so pissed off at him? And it's just like, oh, you wouldn't understand. It's like, well, I know that you hate me a lot more than you hate him. And it's just, whatever, bye. So I don't even know what that scene was about. So then we go back to the trio from the beginning, and they're just flying in a ship, and basically they're just talking to Chemical Kid like, dude, do you know anything? Like, were you given any of the basics at all? And he's like, I may have skipped a few classes in Legion school. And they're like, oh, that's great. Anyway, we got the tracker for this pirate ship. We're going to go and get their stuff, unless you want to stay on the ship, Chemical Kid. And he's like, no, I want to come with. I want to prove myself. So he makes his way out to this pirate ship. And the goal is basically Chemical Kid's going to use his powers to like tear apart the ship, as well as Cosmic Lad using his powers to tear apart the ship. But as he's firing off his magnetic blast, he feels a separate yet opposite magnetic blast back on himself. So they've already made a call to Legion headquarters saying, hey, can you send the science police here? We've got the pirates. And Mon-El's there, and he's like, yeah, sure, they're on their way, but hold on, I need to take another call. And he's like, hi, remember how way back, like God knows how many issues ago, we were worried about the Fatal Five coming back? That's a thing again. Can I make sure, like, first off, Magic Girl, her name is Glorith, can you use your magic to, like, find to see if this chip is anywhere that can recreate what's his name? And she's like, yes, I might be able to. Cool. Second team holding Sunboy, I need you to go check on this axe that belonged to another member named the guy, Persuader. That's the one. Can you go check on this axe and make sure it's still being held in this building or whatever? And Sunboy's like, can do. So they go check on that, and then it's just like, okay, back to you, pirate guys, you cool? But then at that point, Cosmic Lad's like, no, we're not cool anymore. Something's fighting against my magnetism. And it turns out that the pirates are actually members of his own race that also have magnet powers. And he's like, I trained all these years in the Legion. I can't even beat 3 thugs from my homeworld. This sucks. And so they take some asteroids, chuck it at him, and manage to bonk him on the head. So then we cut over to Chemical Kid and Element Lad, and they show him, like, breaking apart the ship, and he's oxidizing it and making it rust very quickly until finally it disintegrates. And he's like, I did it. Hey, didn't I do a good job, Element Lad? But Element Lad's already zoomed off because he realized something's wrong with Cosmic Kid, Lad, whatever. And he gets over there and he sees, like, oh no, he's all bloodied and beaten. Something happened. The pirates are getting away. But Chemical Kid's like, we should go after the pirates. And Element Lads are like, no, there are no hostages. We care for our own. We can always find the pirates again later. Let's get him back to some health bay or whatever. And then the issue ends. Okay, so there's something I really want to point out about this issue. It isn't in the trade, obviously, but I read this digitally, and there was a vote. There was an actual, like, hey, write into DC Comics and tell us who you think the next Legion leader should be. Anybody on the team is fair game. Like, they wanted people to write in and vote. I also happened to check the sales of this issue, and it was about 18,000 comics were bought by comic stores. How many of those were sold? Who knows? But 18,000 issues were bought from Diamond. So if you assume even half those people are, that's 9,000 people deciding whether or not the Legion leader is. And that is a massive, massive overguess on that. Just a weird little thing that there was an actual vote. It's crazy to me. I thought that died in the 90s. Anyway, yeah, so I like how they're taking the time to characterize Chemical Kid. They're actually giving him something besides just, I'm the newbie. Like, he froze up, and yeah, these are all newbie things, but like, it's a characterization. It's something. More so than I feel like I've gotten with almost anybody else here. The fact they're bringing back up this Fatal 5 thing again, dear Lord, I have completely forgotten about that. I assumed that they had already dealt with it, and I just managed to not understand that they had managed to deal with it. But no, apparently it is still a thing that I need to be worried about understanding, which is fantastic. I can't say I like this issue. I also can't say I particularly dislike it. At least in this issue, I understood each of the threads for the most part. I still don't understand the larger Fatal 5 thread, but I got the whole, okay, there are pirates and they've got asteroids and they're members of Cosmic Kids, lads race. I'll get that eventually. So I get it. I understand it. I don't care, but I get it. So overall, I guess I'll give this one a 6 because I can't fault it for anything it did. And I like to see it is moving in a direction where, like, there aren't a billion characters. And in the trade, they have the characters labeled. I've been asking for that this whole damn time. And I thought they just weren't listening. But it turns out they weren't listening until now. So 6. And hopefully it continues to stay readable. Sword of Sorcery number 1, written by Christy Marks, art by Aaron Lopresti. This is the follow-up to the Zero issue. Came out last month. Be sure to check out that because this one provides zero backstory if you didn't know it. So, last issue, Amy and her mother went through a portal, came out the other side, blonde and dressed in purple, and then a bunch of people started attacking them. Picking up right from there, and Amy literally saying all that exact same stuff, until this weird wolf thing with a spiked tail starts attacking Amy. She holds up a shield. It manages to pierce the shield, but she's still safe. She uses her sword, cuts off the tail of the wolf until finally, as it's attacking her, arrow goes right through the wolf's eye. And we see that one of these archers, one of the ones who arrived, or one of the ones who welcomed in Amy and her mother, is the one who saved her. And she still speaks in a language that Amy can't understand, but guy comes up, starts attacking Amy. Amy uses her sword, slits the guy's throat, and she is immediately like, oh dear Lord, I just killed someone. I just did that. And so Amy just like runs over to her mom, who's still in mid-fight, and just like, Mom, I just killed a guy. I felt his sword, it cut his muscle, and I touched his bones. Ugh. And so the mom's like, you're not ready for this. I told you to get out of here. Why aren't you listening to me? And Amy looks around and they see that they're losing the fight. So then we cut over to House Amethyst, where Lady Morgil is, and she's basically chewing out this guy who's come from the mine, who brought along a bunch of amethyst crystals, and she's like, all these crystals suck. And he's like, well, I'm sorry, the tunnel collapsed and it killed 10 miners. And she's like, I don't care. Give me better crystals. All these crystals suck. So at that point, a soldier comes up and says, my lady, one of our scouting groups failed to report in, and they were deep in citrine territory. And just like, oh, that must be them. All right, go ahead, bring me my armor, and let's make our way out there. We have a portal gem waiting. So at this point, Amy, the citrines, because that's their gem type, and her mother are all surrounded by these warriors. And Amy's mom is just like, all right, well, I'll show you what the true power of our blood can do. And she starts glowing purple, and then all of a sudden, these giant amethyst spikes come out of the ground and impale literally everyone who is surrounding them. So the day is saved. Makes you wonder why she didn't do it before, but regardless, she collapses on the ground after she uses it because she's not used to using that much power. And Amy's like, "Oh, Mom, you're incredible. That was awesome. Was that magic? What should I do to help you?" And at that point, Amy's mom turns around. She's like, "How about you listen to my directions next time? You could have been killed. I need you to be alive. You could have been safe." She's like, I was going to leave you here. And he's like, "Yeah, and then we both would have died. Great job." So at that point, she's like, "All right, look, let's not argue in front of a minor house. It's unseemly for us." And she's like, "Unseemly? What happened to my mom? You don't even talk like her, and you've only been here for like 5 minutes." So at that point, she talks to the citrine soldier who saved Amy's life. And she's like, "All right, we got to go." Her name is Ingvi. I'm going to call her Ingvi. She'll handle the language problem, but we got to get out of here. And Ingvi hands over a gem to Amy, which blasts her in the head with a energy blast. And then all of a sudden she's able to understand the language. And she's like, "Oh, cool. So you're speaking English now?" And she's like, "No, you can just understand all the languages, princess." And she's like, "Don't call me princess just because I was sitting out of the fight." And she's like, "What?" And the mom comes in and she's like, "No, you are a princess. You are royalty. You are a princess. Your real name is Princess Amaya of the House Amethyst." And she's like, "Wow, that's a mouthful." So at that point, they're like, "All right, should we bury the dead?" And she's like, "No, we don't have any time. My sister will hopefully bury the dead unless things have changed even worse than I thought." And she's like, "Yeah, no, things have changed worse than you thought. But we got to get out of here." So we see that the sister, Morgil, has come out through a portal. They've got their own version of a greyhound with them. And they make their way up to some ruins because they figure that's where it is. So then we cut over to the Citadel of Lord Rayshan, which is part of House Diamond. And we meet up with 3 brothers who are practicing their archery. And the youngest brother, he's going over to collect his arrows, but his brother stops him, being like, don't ever make yourself a target, even when you're among family. And we see that the older brother's like, "Oh, you think I'm going to stab him in the back?" Pulls out a knife. "Yeah, maybe I'll stab you in the back. How about it?" And the other brother pulls out a knife as well. I'm like, "All right, fine, knife fight. Let's do it. Let's go." And turns out this whole family's just really big on backstabbing. So at that point, the father comes over and he's like, "Shut up. Shut up, both of you. I've had it with you guys." Anyway, as it turns out, we've got a spy inside the citrine house. Turns out that the other Lady Amethyst or whatever has arrived. There's going to be a major power shakeup in the world. We got to be ready for it. And it's like, okay, whose side are we on? It's like, whoever wins. We are the backstabbing house after all. So citrines and the 2 amethystes are making their way through the woods and basically like, okay, so who's in charge of House Citrine now? And Ingvi's like, "Oh, my grandmother, she gave up the title to my mother, but my mother's like a real stickler for the old ways, the traditional ways. So, don't be too crazy about it." And she's like, "No, totally get it. Amy, don't be too crazy." And she's like, "Whatever." But then Ingvi goes off on this whole thing. She's like, "Yeah, no, my house is involved in archiving and librarian kind of stuff, but I don't want to be an archivist. I want to be an archer." And Amy's like, "You do that. You'd be awesome. You're a great archer." So at this point, they set down a portal crystal and are ready to make their way to the house. But Maida has to stay behind. And Maida's like, "Don't worry, I'll take it and I'll hide the portal stone so they can't follow you. They'll never be able to track me down. This is my home country." And Amy's like, "We're leaving one of our own behind." And it's just like, it's a necessity. Otherwise, they could follow us through the portal gem. So at that point, time has passed, and we see that they did manage to find the place where they portaled out, but they left a message gem behind. And Morgil's like, "All right, I know where they went. Give me the message gem." And she goes back home, and they're calling off the search. And when Morgil gets back home, she uses the message gem, and basically it's her sister saying "Hey, look, I'm here. I'm here with my daughter. This is Amaya. This is your niece. Please stop being so evil. Choose the path of hope. Choose the path of love. We can meet in a neutral place. You know where. Just name the time." And we see Morgil staring at the message, looking at Amy. And she just like, oh, am I? You're my flesh and blood, huh? And then it says next time, the path of blood. So I'm guessing she didn't choose the path of peace. Game of Thrones. Like, literally, I read through the series years ago when I first got the trade because I was like, what is this? I'm genuinely hadn't heard anything about it. And I read through it, and I don't remember a lot of those smaller details, but I do remember thinking, because this was years ago, this is just Game of Thrones in DC. This is just exactly what they're doing. They're doing a whole thing of there's these houses, and everyone's making power plays, and there's backstabbing and infighting within the own houses. I am so here for it. It's a level of political intrigue and mysticism and fantasy, and while still getting in this weird, like, structure to it of like, oh no, everyone has their own powers. The Amethysts have this blood power. The Cisterines do this, and there are minor houses and major houses, and I'm so here for it. I love this. Overall, I'm going to give this one 8.5. Art, top of the game. Writing, really do enjoy it. This one was a little bit more setting up the world, whereas the first issue was setting up the characters. I feel that once we get probably not to the next issue, but the issue after that is where the plot's really going to kick in full. But this one did give me a full grasp of Morgul, some of the smaller houses. It gave us that diamond house. I'm loving every second of it. I really can't overstate that. So 8.5 for this issue. Looking forward to seeing how it continues overall. And God, I like it. And that's it. That's all the comics that came out from DC Comics this October 17th, 2012. And much like I said at the beginning, I don't really have a whole lot to talk about. Sword of Sorcery is fantastic. If you skipped over that comic, in fact, if you skipped over any comics, go back and check them out because pretty good week. I mean, middling in some places, but pretty good overall. Sword of Sorcery especially. That being said, if you've been skipping comics, I can't imagine that you're really listening to the ending. Seems like the part you would skip the most, unless you're really interested in hearing about the comics that are coming out next week, in which case, don't worry, I got you, fam. Next week, we have 13 comics coming out, including the number 13 issues of Batman the Dark Knight, Superman, Red Lanterns, The Flash, The Fury of Firestorm, The Savage Hawkman, All-Star Western, Teen Titans, I, Vampire, and Justice League Dark. Additionally, we have the number 4 issue of Batman Incorporated, the number 1 issue of Talon, following up after the 0 issue last month, and we have another one-shot from National Comics, Madam X. This is the final of the National Comics one-shots, and gonna be honest, is Madam X just the same as Madam Xanadu? If it's not, their naming scheme is incredibly similar for no reason, and if it is, you're double dipping, DC, because Xanadu's in at least 2 other books right now, so maybe pick a better character. Regardless, we'll find out next week. But if you have any thoughts on the comics I've said this week, next week, any week at all, go ahead and hit me up on Twitter at DC Comics Podcast, all one word, at DC Comics Podcast. If you don't want to hit me up there, you can also just use the hashtag New52. I would prefer you do both, though. In fact, ignore the fact I said anything about either. You have to do both. That is required. Additionally, we have a Patreon that you could send money to if you so inquire. Patreon is Mild Fuzz TV, all one word. That is Mild Fuzz TV. You get access to early videos, and you get the satisfaction of knowing that you've donated to a good cause. But mainly the first one. Anyway, that's going to do it for me. Thank you very much for watching, listening, however it is you consume this video. I look forward to sharing my thoughts with you next week. And as always, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.